2008, you're in your room learning your AEIOUs and sipping Capri Suns while your parents are in the dining room down in straight whiskey while learning about credit default swaps. Cause it's the Great Recession, baby! Former chair of the Federal Reserve, Ben Bernanke, said it could have started the Great Depression too. I'm poor and so are you, except he probably said it more professionally. But unlike the Depression, this time there were no fedoras, gangsters, and lax safety standards. Only Viva La Vida, Obama, and complex economic issues everyone pretends to understand. That being said, I'm gonna preface this video by saying I love money, but I am not a financial guy. And if you're watching this video, I'm willing to bet you're probably not either. So I'm not gonna go into extensive detail about money words nobody understands. So I'm just gonna give you the crash course, give it to you explain it to you simply. But first we have to start at the start of the 21st century. It's 2000 and everyone's investing in websites and all is well until it isn't. It's like the old saying goes, you can bring a horse to water, but you can't prevent investors from creating a massive bubble that crashes the economy. So investors start looking for new, safe investments that definitely are not gonna crash in the next few years. And they decide the new market is housing. Here come the big money words, so pay attention. In order to get a house, people will usually take out a loan called a mortgage. So a mortgage is when you go to the bank and say, I want to borrow money for house. And the bank says, okay, sign this piece of paper. Now, you have to pay back whoever has this piece of paper with a little bit on top. That's called interest. So you get a house, and I eventually get my money back with a little more. We both win. What if I don't pay you back? Haha, that's called a default. If that happens, I take your house. Sweet, thanks! So the bank has the paper and now you have to pay them. But the funny thing is, the bank can sell that paper to whoever they want, so now you have to pay them. That's where the investors come in. Banks would bundle these mortgages and sell them in bulk like a fucked up Costco to businesses and investors so that they could get that sweet, sweet interest money. The investors bought these because you either get paid the money back, or if the poor people default, then you get to sell their house. It's a win-win. So basically, they're betting on whether people with less money than them are going to be able to pay off their houses. God, I can almost hear Karl Marx weeping. Banks were making bank off these mortgage loans, but there's only so many people who could get a mortgage, so they started to run out. So one day, some business guy goes up to his business boss and says, hey, Mr. Warbucks, so you know how we're running out of mortgages to sell to investors? Yeah. And we only lend these mortgage loans to people with good credit and, you know, income, so we know they'll pay us back? Yeah. Well, what if we just didn't do that? Now basically anyone can get a mortgage. And what if we also tricked people into getting mortgages they can't pay for? But what if they don't pay for them? Simple, we just sell their mortgage paper to some other chump investor before we have to deal with it. Mr. Money'sworth, you're a genius. You're now head of money at the bank. Hooray! So now your uncle who owns a Hummer but lives in a trailer and your friend who spends half his paycheck on weed can both get mortgages, and they were definitely going to be able to pay them back. Since anyone could get a mortgage, everyone was buying houses. So if you're selling a house, you might as well bump up the price a little bit, which means the loans have to be bigger, meaning people are less likely to pay them back, so on and so forth. Not realizing how stupid this was all becoming, credit companies kept telling people that this was actually a really good idea and they should keep doing it by giving it a AAA safety rating. And as the CEO of A24 Studios once said, the more A's, the better. But like your parents' hopes for you, they'd soon find out they were wrong. So to recap, banks are giving loans to people they know will not be able to pay them back, but they're selling them to investors, so if they don't get paid back, it's not their problem. And since anyone can get a loan and buy a house, houses are super expensive. Got it? Well, that's too bad, because it's all about to change.
You've been fired from your job, so you can't pay the bills, and by the way, your wife is leaving too.
In late 2007, people couldn't pay back all the money that they had borrowed, and by early 2008, people had started defaulting like flies. So now, the investors owned their house, so they tried to sell the house, but since everyone was defaulting, every investor was trying to sell a house. So there were too many houses and they were too expensive anyways. So they lowered the house prices. Problem solved? No. Since people who were still paying their mortgages were now paying way more than what their houses were worth. So they stopped paying those mortgages, which means more defaults, more houses on sale, lower prices. You see where this is going. Investors stopped buying the mortgage bundles, which means those lending banks whose entire plan was to sell mortgages to basically anyone and then sell them away before they had to deal with them, now had to deal with them. The fourth largest investment bank, Lehman Brothers, filed for bankruptcy, the largest filing in US history, which kickstarted a banking crisis. Many others had to be bailed out, bought up, or declare bankruptcy themselves.
NASDAQ opens everything They are down 110 points.
The stock market was in free fall. The economy began to tank. The job market was collapsing. Banks were collapsing. The automotive industry was starting to crash because they felt left out or something. In the last 4 months of '08, 2 million jobs were lost. And like crabs in a barrel, the US was dragging everyone down with them. Soon the world entered the recession, with international trade dropping and a credit crisis starting in the EU. But that's not America, so who really cares? Back in America, everything was looking really bad for newly elected President Obama. Being sworn in January of 2009, dude was thrown into the ringer immediately. Now, it wasn't his fault, or even the other guys really.
George Bush doesn't care about black people.
But the government had been kinda lax on their oversight and regulations and such. It's like when your little cousin takes his first soiree into electrical engineering with nothing but a fork, an outlet, and a whole lot of gumption. It's not technically your fault what happens next, but you probably could have done something to prevent it. Quickly, they began offering financial institutions and other major businesses big loans so they wouldn't collapse. Stimulus packages were released, interest rates were fluctuated, and a whole load of financial doohickery started taking place. But this was no ordinary recession. This was a great one. Usually, the market that causes the recession bounces back, but not the housing market, dragging the recession out further. The Dow Jones, otherwise known as the how much money we have meter, dipped 54% below its peak.
Your potty has a shocky thing in it.
Fertility rates dropped, which means less Zoomers, which is maybe a good thing, actually. Speaking of, if you're in your teens or early 20s, so everyone on this site, there's a good chance your parents were just starting their family in the 2000s. So they buy a big new house and maybe a minivan for all you little scamps to go in. It took them all their savings and they had to take out a loan or two, but hey, that's what you gotta do. Then, all of a sudden, turns out that loan you took out has way higher interest payments than you were told. Not to mention, the price of their home just plummeted tens of thousands of dollars. The new car isn't worth shit. One of them probably just got laid off, and God help them if they had stocks of their own. So now they can either pay off the loan in a terrible economy, knowing full well they will never be able to sell this house for as much as they're paying for it.
Coming to bed, honey? Yes, dear.
Or they could default on their loans, losing their house and potentially taking an irreversible hit to their credit score. All while you little bastards are in the other fucking room chewing crayons watching Sid the fucking Science Kid and asking for a Wii. Finally, in early 2009, over $800 billion more dollars were pumped into the economy through a stimulus package, helping to slow the falling employment, industrial output, and spending. In 2010, the Dodd-Frank law was passed, cracking down on predatory lending, which prevented banks from taking on too much risk and tricking customers into taking loans they couldn't pay off. The law put mechanisms in place so that a bank would fail in a controlled manner, which is definitely how all banks fail now. The government declared victory, and the recession officially ended in 2009, except not really. The economic and political effects from it lasted for years. Full-time employment numbers didn't fully recover until 2015, and from 2005 to 11, US median household income dropped 35%, from just over 100K to 70K. In the next few years, the political landscape would be severely shaken, and events like Occupy Wall Street would be directly influenced by the disaster. Its ramifications can still be felt today, and it was probably the most impactful event of the early 2000s, except for that other really impactful event. And frankly, it probably changed your life way more than you know. So, after all this financial mumbo-jumbo, what did we learn from all this? It's that the markets are really too big to fail this time, baby. Woo! The market's just gonna keep going up and up, but for real this time, guys. Invest all your money in the market right now. Millions of dollars every year, never going down. We're gonna be fine forever. Thanks for watching. This is my first video on the channel, so if you liked it, subscribe for more. My next video will be out this week, and I got a bunch more coming down the pipeline. This channel is all about recent history, so the stuff that, you know, still matters and that we lived through, but no one talks about on YouTube for some reason. If that sounds cool to you, hope to see you next time.